Welcome to the Faith and Life podcast. My name is Mike Weaver, pastor at St. Luke, and next to me is Greg Osborne,
Hey.
our student ministries pastor.
Yeah.
Is that what your title is?
I've gone
I should
by
know this, after all.
many. I mean, you are technically my boss. I get called youth pastor. I get called student ministry pastor. I've got called youth director, student ministry director. I'll answer it all. Someone literally in the hallway last Sunday was like, "Hey, Pastor Greg." And so
there you go.
I get it all. So
Right. So today's topic for the podcast is Greg's figuring out his identity in his professional life.
Who am I? Who's God calling me to be?
Hey, so we're glad we're here again for another conversation about faith and life. But before we get to our topic today, we have an inspiring question.
Inspiring?
Maybe it's an interesting question.
I mean, last episode you ended it like, we've solved all your issues on forgiveness, so
That's
now we
true.
got the most inspiring question. I'm not saying you hype up stuff a little bit sometimes,
Well,
Mike, but
that's what I do. So here's the question. Would you rather live in the ocean or travel through space?
like live
Live. It says, would you rather live?
in
Live.
the ocean, like underwater.
Like, be like Aquaman. Or travel through space, like, I don't know what superhero travels through
like
space.
you can say Green Lantern. That's cool.
Green Lantern.
There you go. I don't like either option, if I'm being honest with you. But when I was a kid, I didn't like Star Trek. I just never got into it. We were a Sequest family, and which is Star Trek in the water, and that was what I want, so that's what I'm going with. So I'm pulling a deep cut from my childhood TV shows of Sequest, where they traveled around and got to explore the unknown world of the ocean with Roy Schneider.
Well, I'm going to pull a deep cut from my childhood, too, because I would say the ocean as well. Because when I was a kid, the Super Friends were on Saturday mornings. Batman, it wasn't Robin, it was Batman, Superman, and Aquaman. Mm-hmm. But there were others. But I remember
Wonder
Aquaman.
Twins?
Wonder Twins were a little bit later.
Okay.
But the original Super Friends, before this,
Wonder Woman?
Wonder Woman was on there. But Aquaman really caught my attention when I was a kid. Yeah. And then they had, maybe it's too much information, but they had underoos of these superheroes, and I had Aquaman underoos when I was
something you never thought you needed
never
to know.
Would have,
now you know.
Now you know.
And I was Batman, so
there you are. And I'll tell you that. But here's the ironic thing with that. I don't like to swim. I like to be in the water. I don't like to swim. To me, it's just, I don't know. There's nothing really to it.
I also liked how we both picked the ocean when I feel like 2 weeks ago I was like, oh, the beach is overrated.
True. Well, I think space is fascinating, but to me, there's nothing there. There's a lot there. Don't get me wrong. But there's a lot between here and... There's nothing between here and wherever that next thing is.
Yeah.
It's a lot of nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be cool, but it would be cool to see like Earth
for sure.
from up there. But also I feel like you just go under the water in either Aquaman or in a sub. It's not as like jarring as like the G5s of going into space.
Exactly.
So
True.
There we go.
We're on the same page. And
that doesn't happen often.
That doesn't happen often.
Not on these questions.
Nope. But today's topic is faith and doubt. Faith and doubt. I mean, it's a real thing. I mean, doubt is a persistent part of being a human being. I mean, it could be doubt about faith, but it could be doubt about anything, you know. Doubt is questions. Yeah. Right? And so we'll just dig into faith and doubt.
I mean, I think it's a pertinent question, right? Because doubt is growing. I think it's a process of growing. It's a sign of growth. It's funny because we didn't even talk about this before. Literally, Sunday morning, I was at church, and I get here obviously a couple hours before my family does. And my wife says, uh-oh, the girls are asking questions about Christmas and asking about, are things real? What do we do? I was like, good luck. And she goes, I subverted the question, right? But as they're getting older, it's natural to start to have doubts about things and question things because your mind is learning, you're growing. And I think when we have doubt in our faith, I do think it's such a negative term when it comes to our faith because it's like, well, you don't have enough faith. You just have to have faith. You have to just believe. And I think it doesn't allow us a process of learning and growing like we do with anything else with when we question stuff and learn and have growth there.
Yeah, exactly. It's sometimes we think that something is wrong.
Yeah.
If I have doubt, there is something wrong with my faith, and that's not, to your point, that's not the case. There's nothing wrong. It's just some questions are arising.
But I think I will say, like, I'll be curious your thoughts on it. I think an early growing up in the church, an early proponent of that, of why that is because you had Thomas the doubter. Like, oh, you have little faith, like you didn't, like, until I see the holes in his hands and the holes in his feet, like I won't believe. Like, and it's like, oh, everyone else believed and you don't, like.
Right.
So I think that kind of burned in me as a kid a little bit, that doubt is a bad thing.
Yeah, true. We paint Thomas as the doubting Thomas, and you're right. He gets a bad rap, and yet I think if we polled a group of people, 9 people out of 10 would probably say the same thing that Thomas said. And there's nothing wrong with what Thomas said. Even Jesus himself doesn't correct Thomas. He shows him his hands and his feet, right? He shows him his side. And he says, do not doubt, believe. But he says that after he shows him the evidence. So Jesus doesn't push him to the side. And if he doesn't, I don't think we should as well. He actually embraces it. And actually the disciples, the way it's written, he's not with them on the day of resurrection. Thomas isn't. I think that's right. He's not with them when they're in the upper room. And then it says if some days later Thomas is with them, which is they probably have gone out to get him and find him. So for them, it's not a big deal.
Right.
It's a big deal, but it's not a big deal, right? Of course. It's hard to wrap your mind around a guy rose from the dead. You saw the guy die literally on the cross. And now you're telling me he rose from the dead? Doubts are bound to creep up.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And the question then sometimes is it a threat to faith? Can doubt, not just that it's something wrong, can it threaten faith, doubt?
I think yes and no.
Yeah.
I think it's how you go about your doubt. I think it's how you go about, because whenever you have doubts, chances are you're hopefully then exploring, right? And you're trying to grow and learn. And I would say, depending on where you get your information of how you go about your research, right? That can be a dangerous thing because we're getting so much being thrown at us from different directions. But I mean, there's a famous, all the Case for Christ, the Case for Faith, the Lee Strobel books were all about, if memory serves me right, was a reporter from Chicago or something. It was like, I don't believe in any of this at all. So as an investigative journalist, I'm going to look at the evidence and he came about through all his tracking through of this is true, right? Like, so I think you see time and time again too of where there's stories of people that doubted and that went searching for answers and had questions that then were like, oh, now I'm here.
Right, exactly. And yeah, history is replete with folks like that. Lee Strobel is the guy's name.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. And he was a reporter that investigated these things. So questions drive us to deeper understanding, to greater, deeper faith. Questions are not always very fun.
Right.
And they cause us to feel confused and wrestle, and that's not always pleasant. It's not comfortable, but that's part of it, right? So, I mean, has there been a time where the questions you've had about faith in particular, or questions in general about life, have overwhelmed and have superseded any answers that you've found?
So, like, has there been ever a time where I've had questions and doubts that have been so big that I've never been able to get answers to?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think always. I mean, there's always, for me, in growing up in my faith and in faith, there's always been these questions that just like, trying to wrap my head around the complexity of the Bible and what it means and stuff like that, and trying to process that. And I as a youth pastor, I get questions all the time. So like, it keeps me on my toes a lot of like, where like students are very comfortable asking questions and trying to grow in their faith, because I start to see that as in, and when they do ask the questions, especially in our catechism time, which is eighth grade, not about, it is eighth grade usually for our students. So that's when they're really exploring who they are and trying to step outside of just what mom and dad or grandma and grandpa believe and what they believe. And so, I mean, they hit you with questions all the time. Like just 2 weeks ago, I had a student that was like, hey, so if Jesus came to save us all, like, what about all the people before Jesus? And like, and like those, I'm like, wow, these are some deep theological questions. And the whole concept of, well, creation, and when was it, what is the breakdown of like 7 days our time? Is it earthly days? Is not, like there's so many things that you can go down these rabbit holes of like questions that go, well, the party in the Red Sea, these things, these stories that we've heard, and that I think that challenge us to explore our faith and grow in it. And sometimes I have to be okay and resting in the answer of, I don't understand this, but I'm going to trust in God.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think for me, there was a time like this, particularly during seminary, but it wasn't a question for me of doubting God's existence or Jesus himself or this. It was more about the professors were calling into question my childhood assumptions about Christianity, about the church, and so on, that I just assumed because I'd grown up in the church. I knew what the church structure was like somewhat, right? My mom took me to church, and so on. So that embedded in me a certain way of living and certain belief system, and it wasn't wrong, but there was built-in assumptions in there that need to be challenged to kind of shake it loose a little bit, and to look at the scriptures deeper. So I remember my first year seminary going through my Genesis class, and the professor was an amazing professor, but he was really challenging, and it was hard. It was very difficult to look at Genesis with different lens than when I just normally would just kind of look at the normal, Joseph story, the Genesis story. You just assume it's just 7 days, whatever 7 days is. Just that's what you assume. Oh, we assume it's an apple. No, it doesn't say it's an apple. What is it? It's a fruit. But we make all these assumptions based on other people telling us what it is. But until we start to look deeper at it, and it wasn't the most pleasant experience going through that class, but I am richer because of it. Yeah. Because I had to wrestle with questions and find answers and propose answers to my professor, as everybody in that class did, and it was really helpful, very, very helpful to dig through those doubts. Yeah.
And I think that's for me has always been an encouraging aspect of like when I get challenged in my faith, someone asks me a question, I go, I don't know. Like, that's a good question. Like, yeah, it forces me to dig into maybe parts of scripture that I haven't invested enough time in, haven't, and just it's very easy for me growing up in the church to just go back to like my mindset of like, oh, I remember this story because I've read it, I've heard it 1,000 times. Well, you get moments where you say like, oh, that wasn't actually in the scripture. It's just something that like we've told storytelling times in children's sermons and stuff that now you're like, oh, so what does that mean? And what does this look like? And so for me, when I am faced with questions, it is important for me to say, okay, looking at scriptures and then, or going to people that I trust. Like I ask all the time. I honestly tell the students, I say like, hey, question, doubt all the time, like in catechism. Like if you guys like don't take everything at face value, even if I say it or a pastor says it, like because I think too often with social media, with TikTok and stuff, people have these platforms that we've never had, and so people will just say stuff and we take it as truth, right? And it's important for students and myself and others to take the time to say, okay, where am I getting my information? So like if something you hear doesn't line up scripturally with it, right? Like that's so I'm like, so ask questions. Doubts are okay, and questions, it's what you do with that doubt I think is important.
Exactly. And so I've always said we don't check our brains at the door when we come to church. We use our brains. We use our intellect. God gave us that ability to think and to reason and to question and to wonder and ponder and all these things with each other and with ourselves, right? And with our Lord with us, sometimes mysteriously with us, but it's all part of the process of learning and growing and helping each other grow. So we use all our capacity, neocortex down to the amygdala, the entire brain, to make sure our faith gets stronger and stronger. And so, yeah, exactly. I'm glad you say that to the kids. Yeah, let's continue to think and grow and question and search for answers.
Yeah. But then also, like, for me, like, I also tell them that it's okay to not know.
Right.
Like, you don't. I think because I think having doubt is also cripples us with our faith, with our evangelism model. Like, we're afraid to evangelize because someone's going to come along and ask me a question I don't know the answer to, and they're like, well, yeah, and then that's going to cause doubt and fear. And I think that then kind of sometimes handicaps us as believers to share our faith because we don't have the answers. And sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know, or I'm going to ask. And like, so I do it all the time. I've come to you with questions where I've like, hey, a student asked me this at catechism, and it was a really good question, but I didn't know how to answer this. What are your thoughts? Because I'll say this to him, like, I don't have the best answer for that right now. Let me get back to you. Let me talk with Pastor Mike. And if Pastor Mike doesn't know, I'll call Pastor Steve.
Yeah, right.
And if he doesn't know, I'll call someone else. And
right.
If he doesn't know, I'll call someone. Like, I go through, I'll figure it out. I'll find people that I trust that are going to help me unpack this. And I think that teaches them that it's okay to ask questions and have doubts, but then it's important to bring people in that you trust that are going to help you grow and learn alongside with your scripture and stuff like that too.
Right. So we run the Alpha program, and Alpha is all about inviting people that have doubts and questions. And one of the things that we do in that, and one of the things what I love about Alpha is I've tried to do the same thing that you're saying over the course of my life as a pastor and as a person. Like, if a person has a question, you go, it's respecting that question, saying, yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know. It's okay to say I don't know, but let's explore it together. Yeah. Or we're just going to let the question be the question. And sometimes that's enough for giving permission for somebody to at least ask the question.
Right.
And not give an easy platitude answer. That's just kind of like, it's a nice little bow on the answer that really is the question itself may be really complex to give a nice, simple answer to. So let's just let the question be the question, and that's okay.
Yeah. Rest in that unease sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. It's okay. Yeah. In preparation for this, I found this quote by Rainer Rilke, who's a
strong name.
Rainer. I don't know who names their kids Rainer anymore.
Someone who's like, I want my kid to have a strong name.
Rainer. But he's a German poet from the late 19th century, early 20th century. He has this great quote about doubt and questions. He said he was writing to a protege of his who asked him questions, and he said, Rainer Rilke said, be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves like locked rooms and like books that are written in a very foreign language. I love that analogy, but also his point. Like, just let the question be the question for a while, and don't try to figure it out. Just let it hang there. Like, if I have a book in a foreign language, say Hungarian, I don't know how to read the answer. It's just going to sit there. But maybe as I'm living my life, I'll learn some Hungarian, or I might meet somebody down the road, but I don't know that until it actually happens and I can find the answer. But it's just letting the question hang there and being okay with that uneasiness and that unknown, and then eventually finding the answer. And he's really moving us back into our intuition. Our intuition will guide us sometimes toward an answer that we have. But he goes on. He said, do not seek the answers which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. Live the questions now, he said. Perhaps you will gradually, without noticing it, live among some distant day into the answer. Man, he's deep. Talk about, woo!
That's why people don't name their kid Rainer.
Rainer Rilke, exactly.
Anymore, because, like, how do you follow that?
I know, right? So I'm okay. I think it's okay with that doubt and questions. Yeah. So I think we've, again, solved another problem in the faith and life world.
That's what we do.
You know, if that's our superpower, Greg, that's no.
So no more doubts anymore.
No more doubts.
Actually, when we wouldn't have, so we said have doubts. It's okay. So
that's true. But thanks for listening, and thanks for being part of our conversation. And and if you're at St. Luke, bring your questions. It's part of the learning process.